G'day Darkrealmers, it's horror author and illustrator Michael J. Elliott here with you again, and today I'm taking part in another tag game, and this one is called Stages of Words, started by Joe Compton from Go Indie Now. So let's get started. Okay, yeah. Okay, Darkrealmers, well, for this game we have to take books and use them in the context that they would be if they were a stage play. And it's a very interesting tag, and it's had me thinking. Now, the first question is the monologue, or the greatest speech written ever. And at first I was going to use this speech from A Star Is Born, where Janet Gaynor's grandmother talks about never giving up on your dreams and how you have to battle, and if you're not prepared for tragedy, you might as well, you're not worth having dreams. But I asked some friends, and I couldn't get the whole quote, and I didn't feel right just talking, just partially giving it. So what I've chosen is something that emotionally really upsets me, and it's a poem that it's written word, but it's also very effectively used in the movie Four Weddings and a Funeral, and that's the poem known as Funeral Blues by W.H. Auden. Stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone, prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone. Silence the pianos, and with muffled drum, bring out the coffin, let the mourners come. Let aeroplanes circle, moaning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message, he is dead. Put crape bows round the white necks of the public doves. Let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. He was my north, my south, my east, my west, my working week and my Sunday rest. My noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. The stars are not wanted now. Put out every one. Pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. Pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood, for nothing now can come to any good. Oh, I'm getting a shiver as I just read that, Darkrealmers. And the reason this affects me so much, and I think it's just great, is, okay, on a personal level, and I'm going to be personal here, is that I'm 55, I'll be 56 next January, and I'm still single. Yep, still haven't found, the knight in shining armour. And as I age and I spend more years by myself, I worry about being alone and never finding this kind of love, this intensity of love. So that affects me in a very personal way. But also, when I saw John Hannon deliver this eulogy in the funeral scene of Four Weddings and a Funeral, after his partner, played by Simon Callow, had died from a heart attack, I was in tears. I wasn't just crying, I was wrapped with tears. It was so emotionally powerful. It drained me. It utterly drained me. And it also served as a catalyst, because these friends who had been all single, there was James Fleet character who was always looking for Miss Right, okay, and Hugh Grant's character who was sort of not really into relationships and so forth. And James Fleet turns around and he says, it's funny, all these years we've been friends, and two of them were secretly married. And what he's referring to is that because these characters, and this is in a time before, of course, legalised same-sex marriage, that James Fleet and Hugh Grant didn't consider them as the equivalent of a married couple. They were just two friends in a relationship, and that sort of changed the dynamics for me with that revelation, because it sort of said a lot about how these friends took each other not so much for granted, but didn't perceive the depth of how just being together was actually the same as four weddings. And so this is just one of the most powerful, heart-wrenching poetry pieces I've ever come across, and it works on another level too, I feel, because when we go through grief, we can't understand, why isn't the world stopped? Why isn't everyone grieving with us? Because grief's a personal thing. It doesn't matter who. I mean, apart from public figures, where the world comes together and grieves in uniformity, we have that outrage, that sense of, the world's going on. It's not fair. It's not fair. And W.H. Auden captures this brilliantly. And I can't think of a better monologue that sums up true love and losing true love than this from Four Weddings and a Funeral. Okay, number 2, the best second act or conflict that set up the path for an epic ending. Well, I went with a movie for this one because I had a lot of trouble thinking of books. I haven't read a great many series, so I had trouble sort of thinking back to books that I could dissect into 3 acts. So these tag games are a lot trickier than you think, Darkrealmers. So I went for a movie, and I went for The Empire Strikes Back, because it sets up things like Luke, I am your father, the death of Obi-Wan Kenobi, the will they, won't they succeed, the rebels, all that sort of thing. So I thought that was a great second act that led us wonderfully into, Return of the Jedi. Number 3, the best third act that gave us the best ending. I'd have to say Lord of the Rings, both book and the movie, because there were so many, you've got this fractured group of the Fellowship, and they're all completing their own little survival tasks and so forth, but they all have to come together, and they all have to, stop, this evil that's happening, and the intense battle scenes with the orcs and so forth, just wonderful. I thought that was just epic. It was just brilliant. Okay, stealing the scene. The moment an ancillary character stole a scene or two from the stars. Well, once again, I'm going with Lord of the Rings, and I've gone with Gollum because that character is just amazing. He's this beautiful blend of, because he's been corrupted by the ring, he's deliciously evil, but he comes across as, pitiful at the same time, and treacherous and yet vulnerable, and so he's one of those wonderful characters. You don't know where you stand with him. Just when you think, oh, he's evil, he'll say something gentle and childlike, and you go, oh. And yeah, so I think he steals the scenes from Frodo and Sam in Lord of the Rings, definitely. Okay, Encore, the work that gave you more than you asked for when you first started. Well, for me, it had to be Cindy Snyder's Crown of Stones, because I'd read some fantasy, and I'm always a little bit wary of it because, I found Lord of the Rings such tough going because of, everything that goes on and I didn't know what to expect with Cindy's work, whether it was going to be that high fantasy, but it was brilliant, as soon as I got into it, and I could see, the world around that she'd created, and I could see these characters and these races, and it just left me wanting more and more and more. You know, and I virtually devoured the trilogy. And then I came to the end and I was in tears. I mean, it was a great ending, but I was in tears. It's like, you know, you're waving goodbye to a good friend. So, you know, brilliant, just wonderful. Okay, Confrontation, the most intense, most memorable confrontation in your mind. Well, this one had me in tears too, Darkrealmers, both in the book and the movie. And I'm talking about the scene from, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, Chronicles of Narnia, where Aslan voluntarily gives himself up to be sacrificed to the White Witch in order to save Edmund's life. And that was just so poetic and so wonderful. And the filming of it, as Tilda Swinton, you know, like delighted in murdering Aslan, and all these, you know, her dark followers cheering her on, and him being belittled, and I was in tears. It just, you know, like, and when those, you know, the Lucy and that found Aslan, and I was there hugging this lion myself, okay, and of course it was C.S. Lewis was quite religious, and that was his metaphor for Jesus being sacrificed on the cross, of course, and it was just wonderful, both in the book and, as I said, in the movie. They filmed it brilliantly. Okay, the greatest love story. Okay, Darkrealmers. Well, I think you sort of gather from what I said at the beginning that I'm sort of, at this stage of my life, I'm a little bit cynical about love. So I don't read a lot of love stories, and not many of the books I read have great, passionate love stories in them. So I'm going to be very plain and very boring and very generic and go with Romeo and Juliet. And yeah, surprised I haven't read it. No, because I went to a technical school, which is the equivalent of a high school where you learn trades and so forth. And we didn't do Shakespeare in high school. The first contact I came into Shakespeare with was when I went to Teachers College, and we had to ring King Lear, and that was tough going. But I know enough about Romeo and Juliet, and you know, it's been adapted and so forth so many times for modern audiences that yeah, you basically know the story. And I think that's, you know, probably one of the greatest love stories ever, next to probably Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Okay, the most memorable backdrop or scenery. Okay, for me, this was from the Hunger Games. And I loved the dichotomy between the capital, the excesses of the capital, where, you know, flashing lights, neon signs, you know, everything screamed wealth and privilege, compared to Katniss's, you know, her area that showed poverty and struggle and everything like that. It was just wonderful. And I think that it was captured so brilliantly, both in the books and the movie. Okay, and finally, the book you'd love to see performed on stage. Well, I think my choice, it's just, it would be perfect for a stage play, and that is Anatomy of a Darkened Heart by Christy Stratos, because it's, you know, the Victorian costume. I mean, that's one of the things you love about theatre. It's seeing the actors in gorgeous costumes, and Christie's, you know, creation of this Victorian era household, you know, with the fashion from that period, and the houses, you know, the whole Victorian wallpaper, and I think it would be absolutely spectacular. So apart from the scenery, of course, it's a brilliant dark drama, very chilling and psychologically, in some ways, disturbing, and it would make a great theatre piece. It really, really would. So I could see this, you know, being on stage, no problems whatsoever. Okay, there you go, Darkrealmers. There's my choices for the Words Are a Stage game. I hope you've enjoyed my choices. I'd like to thank Joe Compton for tagging me for this. They're getting harder, Joe. My brain, it's getting older. It's getting harder to think back like this. Okay. But I have a lot of fun doing them. So thank you for joining me, Dark Realmers. And I'll sign off for now. And this is Michael J. Elliott saying thank you for being with me. And as I always say, stay in the light, Dark Realmers. Bye for now.